Welcome, friends, to GameMasters Studio, where we talk shop about running tabletop role-playing games. With us today is Jared and Ed, with your host, Jerry.
Hello and welcome to GameMasters Studio, where we'll be talking tips and tricks about tabletop role-playing game, and hopefully some advice that you can help use in your own game to help bring it up to the next level. Today we're going to be talking about the options of a railroad game versus a sandbox game, explain what we're talking about, some of the pros and cons of each, and discussing some of that for you. My name is Jerry, aka Frieden. I'll be your host and moderator today. With me in the studio is Jared, aka dm.f, proprietor of Mad Doc Designs, creator of the World of Wrath, and semi-professional GM, and Ed.
I say things!
Yes, you do.
All right, so today we're talking about the comparison between railroading and sandboxing games. Mm. Now, we want to take a moment first to define what each of those is. Mm. So I would say that railroading is when your players are presented with a clear and present goal and no real side options to go on. They're stuck on the rails, they have to go there. And sandbox really comes into dropping them into an open area and letting them do whatever without giving them any sort of goals whatsoever, right, as the two extremes. What do you guys think of those as definitions?
I think that sounds pretty good, sir. Pretty spot on.
Yeah, those are definitely two clear ways. You can kind of think of them, say, video game style. You're going to have your kind of, by the nose video game play where you go from mission to mission to mission to accomplish the task and beat the game. And there's the other ones like
more like Skyrim,
kind of Fallout, stuff, where you just kind of dropped in there. Yeah, you have something you can go do if you want, but you don't gotta.
And this is a nice point there to hit pretty early on, is that going to one extreme or the other isn't really that fun. If you have a sandbox game that's wide open with nothing to do, then you're going to have players who are wandering around not sure what to do. If you have a railroad game where everything is set and they have to do this, then this, then this, then this, then they have no freedom to make any choices of their own, and they're going to feel like they're getting boxed out.
Yeah, some blend of the two to some degree is always good, even if it's just an 80-20 kind of ratio.
Right. And it also depends on your players, depending on which one you'll pick. So if you have, say, newer players or players who are less explorative, then certainly a railroad style is just fine. You give them some, have them go through a local cave or whatever. They find a note that says there's a bad guy in the area, and okay, now they're going to go try to take that bad guy, and there's another one after that, Better details than that, of course, but that'd be a way to run that style.
They have to go rescue the princess. When they think they find her, a talking mushroom tells them she's in another castle.
Yeah.
Damn you, Toad.
Is that a game you ran?
I've considered doing something similar.
Oh, cool.
And then the other side is, actually, like you said, in reference to games like Skyrim and Fallout, where you've got the open world, but people are going to ask you to do stuff which you can use to help guide your players. Mm-hmm. Which I think is important, that it helps the players have a meaning and a cause. Yeah. Because once you start getting momentum in a sandbox game, it's going to build on itself. Once they realize that, we've been there, we can do this there, or we could do this, or we could explore this area we haven't been, they start getting stuff they want to do. But early on, they need some stuff to get them going, just to get them
right.
To get them to experience the world, to get them to see what's out there, to start to understand their options.
Yeah, even in an open world or a sandbox game, you typically want to present the group or the players with at least one, if not two or three options without pushing them in a direction, but you need to make sure and clearly identify paths that can be walked so that they feel like they have a direction, because you just pop them in the middle of a desert or in the middle of a forest somewhere, and it's going to be like, what do you do? Are we playing Don't Starve? Should I be collecting sticks to make a fire? What's going on right now? I don't know what to do.
Did this become a survival game?
Yeah, I just don't know what to do. You're not giving me any direction.
Yeah, I actually just started running a sandbox game. The funny part was the first session. Most of it was by the nose for the first session, because they played a little bit. There's like a tower they had to beat, and then they were going to be going into this other world they're teleported in. And the first and only hint I gave them was, well, you see a hill, you could go up there and try to get a view of the area. And then when they did, I showed them mountains off in the distance. There's like one structure they saw. They're on a coast, east to west. They could go either direction. And that kind of gives them the idea of, oh, where do we go from here? We could go check those mountains out. We go check out that structure, which is what they picked. You got to know your map, though. If you're doing a sandbox, you got to know what's where, at least in the immediate area, for the players.
Yeah, you need to have materials and maps and or at least, good descriptors ready to go for your players, because you're in an open world, a sandbox kind of thing. Again, you're presenting them with the world, or at least with their current environment, and they need to be able to make decisions off that. So they need a lot of information. So if you don't already have maps drawn out or made on the computer, or you can steal maps from wherever, it doesn't matter where you get them from. But if you don't have those materials, you need to have a lot of the information already written down, set in fact, stone, on a list, so you can then read that off to your players and give them that information, so then they can work with that factual information and make decisions from that.
So, which means the sandbox game is very heavy, or can be very heavy, on the prep side of the improv versus prep scale that we talked about previously. But I think it's also very heavy on the improv side, because you can wind up having the players look and say, oh, there's a coastline and there's mountains and there's a structure. Let's go away from everything out into the middle of nowhere.
And that's exactly right. Yeah. And you have to be able to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, depending on your approach, because everyone's going to approach the same concepts a little bit differently, because everyone's, an individual, but I don't think that either one necessarily has more than, because if you're doing a railroad type, then you have to have you're going to have every single encounter prepared, you're going to have every single NPC prepared, you're going to have a lot more fleshed out to the dime, it's just going to be like to the point, a lot more fleshed out. These are the railroads. They need to go talk to Granny Smith, who will then lead them to Susie May, who will then lead them to this person, who will then give them the quest to go kill the kobolds in the gold mine, who then will lead them to this. Then they find the golden scepter, which leads them to the key to the castle, and that's all fleshed out. You're planning steps ahead, and you're also coming up with reasons to keep them on that path. So there's a lot prep there. I think with your open world, there's a lot of prep for your environment.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it, again, more or less. I think it's probably about the same.
I think you're right.
I think probably while they're both about equal in prep, I think open world just lends a lot more to improv, because you don't know what decisions they're going to make, and you have to be ready to deal with that. Whereas your railroad, there's a lot less improv.
Yeah. It's kind of a case where with the sandbox, you're preparing the world and improving the reactions to it, where in Railroad, you're preparing the path they're taking and have to be ready to improv the world.
Right.
Because they could go off the rails and wind up going somewhere you didn't expect. They were supposed to recover a clue from the gold mine, but instead to kill the kobolds, well, let's divert the river and flood the mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They achieved the goal, but not in the way you expected, and not in the way that leads to the next option. So now you need to come up with some way to keep the game from dying right there.
Yeah, good point. If it goes off the rails, then you definitely have to be ready to improv the world. That's a good point.
And so with a railroad style game, you actually also have the option that you don't have with open world, is you can kind of schedule everything out. Like one game I ran early on, I had, this is what happens day 1, this is what happens day 2, this is what happens day 3. I was totally ready for them to just kind of, if they did go off the rails, that's fine, no big deal. I wasn't worried about that. But if they stick to everything, which I thought they would, and they did, I kind of had a schedule out for how I planned on events happening. Worked out pretty good. But
I actually, for all of the games that I run, I like to keep, as a DM, a day log. Yeah. So I just have a note that on day 1, this happened. On day 2, this happened. On day 3, this happened. Mm-hmm. And it comes in handy because on day 17, they sent a message to a contact that says, meet us on day 25 in the woods at this spot. And when day 25 comes, their contact is going to be there to meet them, whether or not the PCs are there.
Right.
So it helps me keep track of what's going on in the world, to figure out that if stuff's going on, how long has it been taking? Because you can have a case where, we met last week and played, and it was a morning, and then we met the next week and played, and that was the afternoon of that day, and then we met the next week and played, and that was 5 days because we were traveling.
Right.
So it's now been, it's been 7 days since this happened at the beginning of what happened 3 sessions ago. So, being able to keep track of the time movement in your game as opposed to time movement in the real world can help you keep track of what's going on, what should be happening, and help provide realistic timeframes for things to go on.
Yeah, as far as tracking in-game time, I mean, I don't see any huge advantages one way or the other. I mean, it just comes down to your record keeping, which is all a matter of, with the railroading, you can record keep in advance, where if you're open world or sandboxing, then you just have to make sure that you're keeping doing your record keeping in the moment, in time, real time, making notes during the game,
Right.
or at least making enough notes, or that you can then make more thorough notes after the game, or sitting down before you forget everything after the game and writing everything down. So before, during or after for open world, prior or in the moment of for railroad. But again, that's in-game time. For when it comes to actual sessions, I think an advantage of the railroad is you can maintain balanced encounters, and I don't mean like level-wise balance, but like sharing the spotlight kind of concept, which we'll touch on more thoroughly in another episode. But the idea of spreading the love. So, okay, well, we've had a lot of fight encounters. Let's do some trap encounters. Let's give the rogue a chance to shine a little bit. And you can plan that out. Whereas if you're improvising a lot because you're having to do, the open world thing, you have to be much more conscious of that in the moment. And you have to be ready to just pull something out of your butt. And okay, well, we've had a lot of fighting. They've been doing a lot of traveling. I really want to try to get this rogue a chance to shine. I need to think of something, but they won't stop traveling and hunting.
Right.
And there's not opportunities there also, but you have to be ready to deal with that in the moment. Okay, how do I give the cleric a chance to shine? Because he's like totally charisma-based cleric. Like he's the preacher man. But they're still in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of the woods. Okay, I know, they run into some wild elves and they need to negotiate their way out of it because they're totally surrounded. If they try to fight, they're dead. But you just gotta have to be able to, again, and it comes down to your improv abilities. Improv isn't all just being able to pull dialogue out of your behind, but so much as also being able to pull out encounters, appropriate encounters. I mean, a lot of different encounters can work in a lot of different situations, but helping to spread that love so it's not just, I don't know what to do, here's a random encounter. I don't know what to do, here's a random encounter. I don't know what to do, here's a random encounter. Think on the fly a little bit, throw, some, okay, you lose your trail, let's pull the ranger or the rogue out and let's see if they can do some tracking and try to get them back on course. Let's have the random, tribe of wild elves, or maybe even something more bestial. Maybe like there's a band of orcs, but again, there's just too many and they have to try to talk their way out of it. So, like, good luck, but here's our charismatic dwarven cleric gonna try to talk our way out of this huge orc fight.
And that's actually, I'm glad you bring that up, because that's one advantage I think Sandbox has over Railroad. They're both really good. Either way is fine, but one advantage Sandbox has over Railroad is your players may look at a potentially dangerous threat in a Sandbox game as something we should run away from. If you've been spending your time on Railroad, you kind of point, okay, you go to this encounter, then you go to this encounter, then you go to this encounter. When they see the really bad beastie and you take your time to describe what this thing is and how powerful it looks, the players might in their head think, well, we've been going from one encounter to the next to the next. This is clearly the next encounter, and just go after it.
Yeah.
When you are maybe as a GM hoping maybe they'll get scared, maybe they'll run away, maybe they'll decide, to retreat and fight again another day. Mm-hmm. That's what you were hoping, and they say we fight it, and like you're looking at the stats, like I made this thing a CR 20. These guys are level 7.
Did they know I just described a Terrask to them?
Yeah, exactly. And then so they go fight it, and you basically wipe them. Now, and from there you can either say, okay, well, new game, or you can, I guess, to be God and like say, oh, you survived somehow. Yep. Someone saved
a bunch of NPCs come in and carry your limp, almost dead corpses away.
You guys wake up in Rivendell.
Yeah. That's definitely a very good point, because if you railroad, a lot of players have that player trust, which again we'll cover in another episode, but sometimes player trust can be misguided. The whole concept of like, if the DM's presenting us with this option, then obviously we can kill it. We trust our DM to only ever give us level appropriate encounters.
Exactly. Whereas if you're a level 4 group trouncing through a sandbox and you've cleared out everything so far, but then you find yourself in the middle of a lair of a green dragon, you might think to yourself, no, we can't take this thing on.
Yeah.
No, this is too big for us.
We put us here.
Yeah.
The DM didn't put us
Exactly.
here.
We got here
We
accidentally.
probably shouldn't be fighting this.
And another one, and again, it's referencing a topic that we'll be covering later on, but it's the total party kill.
Yeah.
TPK. I think in a way it's good for players to have that happen occasionally.
Yeah, I do.
Because you need to show that they're not invulnerable. They're not always going to get away. I remember I've had times where I've had characters die where my initial reaction was, wow, that's really unfair. But then looking at it in the back, like, no, that was actually the most fair thing possible.
Yeah.
Because he was in over his head. I wanted to survive, but just because I wanted it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Right. It's not like you had a goblin triple crit your orc, half-orc barbarian to death. It was, a really tough situation that they went and got themselves into against a group of badasses, and these badasses took them out because that's what they are.
Yeah, just because you want it doesn't mean you get it. Like, you can want for your half-orc level 1 fighter to one-shot the Teresk all you want, but that's just not ever going to happen, ever. And sometimes you do. You just need to teach your players humility. You need to teach them that they're mortal characters.
And I think as a player, it's important to keep that humility in mind as well, because you're going to take a little more care. You're going to be a little more cautious because I like this character. He could die. And you're going to be acting like a character who's in this situation looking and go, I could die. I'm not going to take the action that's going to lead to my likely death. Right. I'm going to do what it takes to stay alive because I like being alive.
Yeah, and I think what helps a lot for me personally when I'm playing or when I'm DMing, when I shoot for a lot of immersion, which, as we're saying all the time, we're trying to catch up, something we'll cover again later, but I really try to not think of my character as a disposable pawn on the chessboard, more as like, I am playing this character, I am role-playing this character, this is me, or an extension of myself or my consciousness, and I would rather not die.
Yeah, a lot of new players will play... It's a piece of paper and some dice.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. If that's how you play, that's fine. But I would suggest immersing yourself a bit more. But again, this is a topic that we're going to hit another time.
You also get the flip side of the coin with new players sometimes, too.
Yeah.
I want to win. Dying is not winning. So I want to make sure that my character stays alive forever. So you get people that hit that other side as well.
Yeah, but then when you're looking at it from the win aspect, sometimes running away is losing.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, there's that's not a 2-sided coin. That's like a 3 or 4-sided coin somehow.
It's like perhaps die-sided.
Yeah, it's a 100-sided die-sided coin. But yeah, so some people will look at it as like running away is losing. I have to fight and I have to win. Dying is the ultimate loss. But running is losing. Like, I am presented with a challenge. I will engage the challenge. I will beat the challenge.
And sometimes players look at a challenge completely different from you. I had the infamous time where the players were having a long role-playing session and a lot of talking. They went out into the woods, and I gave them some orc raiders to kill for the fun of it. And they're like, no, we want to talk to these people and negotiate peace. And it led to a really interesting story arc because I presented an encounter that the players didn't look at the same way that I expected them to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that can backfire too, because sometimes you have like this vampire guy that you expect to have a long conversation with, and then we just start beating the crap out of them.
Yeah.
You never know what to expect. Players are a bunch of jerks.
Although, since we've made a couple references to the game already, my recent Sandbox game that we just kind of wrapped up with an amazing, or at least in my opinion, I thought it was a really fun conclusion. Stopping point.
Yeah,
we'll be picking it up at some point again, probably. But I learned a lot about running a sandbox game from it. With probably the most important thing was I had to listen very carefully when my players were planning, because they were talking about, well, we could go do this and we could do this. And well, this is going on. This person goes and does that. And they go and do this. And the whole time that they're sitting there talking back and forth, I have to, as a DM, I'm sitting there, I'm being silent. I can't give my input because my I don't have a persona in this conversation between the players. But also as a DM, I'm taking notes and I'm figuring out, and like, oh, they're going to go do this. That means I have to know what's waiting for them when they go that way. It might be something that, oh, you're going to go in the 5th story window of a building. Well, nobody's going to protect the 5th story window with any sort of traps or even bother locking it because it's the 5th story. But on the other hand, if they're like, okay, so we'll just walk in the front door and do this. Okay, well, what type of security is at the front door? How do they react when somebody walks in the front door and starts doing that? I have to figure out all that stuff. And I really had to listen to what the players at the table were doing and what they were planning so that I could, I'm going to use the word counter plan, but I'm not planning to counter their ideas so much as planning so that when their ideas happen, I've planned for them in a realistic manner.
Right.
Yeah, he's appropriately preparing.
Yeah.
Yeah, observation skills are extremely important for a DM, in my opinion. Not just listening, but, again, watching body languages, seeing who's engaged, who likes what, like we've talked about in the past, but just being observant at the table, like you're a poker player, like watching the other players, looking for tells, and maybe that's because I do play poker that I'm, making that association. But as a DM, I find my observational skills some of the most important skills when I'm sitting at the table.
Mm-hmm. And I've had that happen where I've watched the players, during combat and just, kind of keeping an eye on everybody out of the corner of my eye. And I see that this person has done something, and the person next to them suddenly grabs the player's handbook and starts flipping through it furiously to the back. I'm like, he's got some spell that he's trying to figure out exactly how it works because he thinks he's going to turn the tide of the battle. So I have to, and then when that comes around, by the time it gets to them in initiative, I'm already flipping open to the spell books because I know, okay, this is something coming up that I need to know what he has planned so that I can figure out how it actually works in game.
Yeah, I got to be ready for this guy.
Yeah.
And you'll learn those players. It's about getting to know your players. You'll learn who's going to take kind of the weight of the whole battle on their shoulders. And like, I've got a really good plan that's going to turn this fight around. And who's going to be my turn? Oh, I'll hit the guy in front of me.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's what really all it comes down to is getting to know your players when you're running a game. The first few sessions, you're gonna figure out what their skill sets are, what they're like, if they can be that person who's prepared before they get to their turn or not prepared. And really, if you're planning a game, if you go into it knowing your players, that's going to be a really good tool to help you know whether or not that they would prefer something more sandboxy or something more by the nose, or even something that combines the two. You could have a plot that is kind of an obvious point-by-point plot, but also within a sandbox. And that's part of the reason I mentioned a schedule earlier. It was a superhero game, and every 7, 8, or 9 days, I'd roll randomly D6 plus 4 or something. And that's how many days, after that many days, the main villain did something else. And now if they were spending all that time trying to figure out what he was doing, where he was going, they might be able to try to stop him. Mm-hmm. But every so often he pops back up, does a villainy thing, and then goes away. And then they also have that amount of time to just kind of explore the city, fight other villains, that sort of thing. So,
yeah, you really need to know your players too if you're going to do a railroad, because you need to know what kind of decisions they're going to be making. Not just what will engage them, not just what will, make it so they're having fun, but to kind of plan appropriately. Like, okay, well, if I present them with a clan of kobolds in this gold mine, are they going to just slaughter all the kobolds and take the gold for themselves? Are they going to try to negotiate with the kobolds? We don't know. If you know your player types, and you know what your group likes to do, how they atypically will deal with a situation, what kind of choices they make, then you can make that railroad seem less railroady because they think that they're making their natural decisions, but you planned for it and were ready for it the whole time.
Yep. Are they going to collapse the gold mine and the kobolds and pretend there never was a mine in the first place?
Are they going to burn down half of low water? Who knows?
I actually had an interesting bit of inspiration come up recently regarding knowing your players so that you can plan ahead of time. I have a new game that I'm going to be running, and I was sitting around the bonfire talking with a couple of players the other night. And one of them made a mention of I'd like to see you do this at some point in the game. And I realized this. I started talking to them about, well, what if as players, before we start the campaign, before we start the game, give me a list of 4 to 5 things that you'd like to see happen during the game. Keep it general, but like along the lines of like, I want to fight a Hydra at some point, or I want to go to a different plane, or I want to be given a chance to lead an army. Obviously, we can't fit in everything, but I just had the idea of let's get some input from the players about what's going to happen, what they want to see, so that I can tailor that a little bit more to like, so when that point comes, that player's going to be, yes, this is awesome. This is exactly what I wanted.
Yeah, some of those ideas might mesh together really well, more than you even realize in the moment. Like, this guy really wants to fight a Hydra. This guy wants to, like, I've never, like, traveled through a swamp before. Like, oh, I can easily throw a Hydra in a swamp. Cool. Yeah. 2 birds, 1 stone. Boom. Yeah, you never know. Inspiration comes from everywhere. It's always good to do surveys of your players and, like, discreetly, like, prod them for thoughts and ideas and wants and desires. Everyone wants to have the level 20 epic character, but some people might, like, I have a particular player that's been wanting to play a Minotaur forever, like his entire existence. I want to play a Minotaur. Can I be in a game where I can play a Minotaur? Please find a game somehow, somewhere, sometime where I can play a Minotaur, and it's okay. It's not because I want to be more powerful than everyone. I don't care if the whole group is a Minotaur. I just want to be a friggin' Minotaur. That has not come up yet. I haven't had that chance yet, but that's very much in the front of my mind. Whenever I know that this player is going to be joining a game again, that's a priority. It's not going to be happening in the next game because he's supposed to be in my next game. That won't be happening, but probably the game after that. I'm like, you're a Minotaur, dude. I know you want to be a Minotaur. You want to be a Minotaur forever. Here's a Minotaur. Have a giant battle axe and have a ball.
Yeah. I can confess that it's not me because I played a Minotaur before. It was awesome.
Yeah, I have as well. Minotaurs is great.
Yeah. So I think one of the other important things, getting back to the actual topic of Sandbox versus Railroads, is I don't know if we brought this up, but I think that new players are better suited for a little more of a railroad game.
Yes.
So they can start to see a structure, see how a game works, and get an idea of what's going on, and then eventually kind of have the tracks end and open up a little bit and see how your players react to that. Some of them are going to be, oh, we can do whatever we want. Okay, I'm going to go do this. I want to go do that. I want to go do this. And some are going to be, okay, where's the next lead coming from?
Yes, yeah. Some of them it's going to be a long time before they're ready to let go of the handles. They're like, tell me where I need to go. I don't know where I need to go. Like, I'm holding on to the guardrail. Tell me where to go. Yeah, atypically, I would totally agree with that. There's always exceptions to the rule, but there's no point in dwelling on the exceptions. Definitely newer players you want to railroad.
And hopefully, if you're introducing the game to a batch of newer players, then you can identify somebody who's got the type of personality where they might be able to step up and be, hey, we should do this, we should do that.
Yes.
If you're in a mixed group of new players and more experienced players, as a DM, you may want to speak to your more experienced players about taking a leadership role.
Yeah.
We've had games where we've determined out of game that, who should lead the party right now? This person should have their character leading the party. And then in game, we just kind of deferred to their leadership. It works out, and as long as everybody's on board and you don't have those player conflicts, which we will be speaking about in a later episode, we'll be able to have some fun with it.
Yeah, and always be ready for what I jokingly call junior leader training. It's a Boy Scout term. But looking for the up and coming potential leaders, because your experienced players aren't going to want, say you have 2 experienced players in a group of 6, they're not going to want to be the leader all the time. And eventually those other 4 novice players are going to become less and less novice and more experienced. And just looking for just actual player types, not player type, but actual, the person's personality, are they a little bit more strong-willed? Are they a little bit more of a natural leader in real life? People that are more natural leaders in real life are going to be more natural leaders, instinctually in game. But first, they're going to want that comfort, atypically. So, you look for that kind of personality trait and be like, all right, let's start pushing the leadership over towards this guy. Let's give him some chances to, him or her some chances to shine. Let's let them make some decisions. Like Jerry said, let's make it out of game, conscious decision to push the leadership this way. Let them grow. We've done that in a couple of my games. It was a big conversation. We know that, this player, who was the female, we know that this player is a newer player, but she's been in a few games now. I think that she has the opportunity to be, a leader in the group, and no one else really is itching to take that role right now. Let's kind of push the authority her direction and see how she handles it. She needed a little bit of guidance at first. At a game, she came to me as the DM, like, I don't know what to do. Like, pretty much what's going to happen is you just listen to everyone's thoughts and decisions, and then you just pick one that sounds the best to you, and they're like, that's what we're doing.
Yep.
That's it.
What Captain Picard did.
You listen to A, B, C, D, and E, and you go E.
Because that's the last one, and that's the one I remember.
Roll with it. I don't have to explain why. Maybe I can't explain why. Maybe I legitimately agree, but if you don't know, you can't think of a better reason, you just go eeny, meeny, meeny, miny, mo. Just, you need to be the one that makes that solid, definitive decision at the end. This is what we're doing. This is the path we're taking. Just roll with it.
And that can help transition your game from a railroad heavy to a bit more sandbox style.
Yep.
And, lets the players have control over the world, have control over the game, because really it is a cooperative effort. The players are your stars, and they should have quite a bit of hand in creating the game as well. Because as a DM, if you're going to be making the game by yourself and deciding that this is how things are going to go and making sure that things go that way, you're really just kind of playing with yourself and not with a group.
Yeah, it's much more interesting for you as the DM if you let other decisions be made by other people.
Yeah, and it's less work. Because then what do I have to prep? Oh, that's right. They said they were going to go do X. I need to make sure that I'm prepared for when X happens. Mm-hmm. I want to have my maps appropriate and have personalities for the people they're going to run into.
Yeah, or even if you do prepare something ahead of time and then your players start talking about, man, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? And you think, well, man, I've already got all my cities made, but, maybe this one I wasn't too keen on, and this would be really good if this was the Necropolis that they thought they wanted to travel through. So sure, I'll make a Necropolis for them. Yeah. Why not?
Never, ever get too attached to your ideas that you're not willing to change them if something better comes along.
Exactly.
Yeah, things can always be altered and things can always be recycled and reused later on. Like, oh, well, I had a whole day's session planned, but throw that out the window. Don't throw it out the window. Put it in the back of your book, and that can be muted into another session later on. Change a few names here and there. Boom, Bob's your uncle. You got session 3 already. You never know. No material is wasted material.
Well, we are just about out of time, so we are going to wrap it up here for today. Thank you for joining us. Definitely feel free to follow us on Twitter at gmsstudios.com. We are also on Facebook and have a message board at gamemasterstudios.proboards.com. We have new episodes coming up every Tuesday here, and we will see you the next time that we are in the studio. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.